I only had lupus for 4 years, but I'm in a remission period. I've been on a remission period for 1 or 2 years now with the medication I take twice a day. But so for Michael, he was diagnosed with lupus in the 1980s, particularly around the Thriller era. And there's a couple
Hmm.
pictures like with the red on his face. A lot of people thought he was blushing like he was embarrassed. Well, unfortunately, it's a rash on his face. And it kind of looks like he
Hmm.
got sunburned, but it's not sunburned. And usually, if you have a rash on your face, it's one of the first symptoms you see with lupus. But unfortunately, see, it's kind of hard to understand lupus for me still because I had it for a couple of years. But Michael had a different type of lupus compared to me, that he had kind of like a skin type of lupus, which is discoid lupus, and I had systematic lupus, which is a lupus that attacks your body cells. But for Michael, um, sorry, I'm trying to
I,
read this in
oh, you're
between.
fine. It's okay. I can jump in a little bit. I think I heard somewhere that his lupus like affected like his bones or like the joints or something,
Yeah,
like where he was in a lot of pain, and I heard it also caused him to lose his eyebrows and eyelashes.
so not a lot of people understand that what you're saying, but it is true that over time it could have been possible that the lupus got to his joints and eyelashes. I'm not exactly sure about the eyelashes part, but the joint part, it is true because people with lupus could have joint pain. And
Mm,
after the collapse of the bridge in 1999, in Munich 1999, when he fractured his back, during that time, I felt like the lupus was progressing more a little bit with his joints and stuff. But
yeah.
another thing that was interesting was after his passing, a person on ABC News was mentioning about how Michael being weirdness could have been tied to his vitiligo and lupus. Now, we know Michael's not a weird person, but vitiligo obviously affected his skin, but the lupus part affected him from breathing because he always complained of shortness of breath. And
Mm,
another thing to tie with that, way before he was diagnosed in the 80s, in I believe in his biopic, biography Moonwalk, the book, there was a newspaper statement from Joseph saying that Michael had a lung collapse during the filming of The Wiz, that he was complaining of shortness of breath. And then there's also another thing that I think that was in Jermaine's book about Michael almost having a lung collapse on the beach. I forgot what that was, but I do remember Jermaine saying something like that in Jermaine's book.
oh
So
wow.
this is, lupus you don't play around with, but I feel like when Michael passed away, the lupus was part of his death as well as the drug abuse. But
Yeah, there was a doctor who was interviewed after Michael died, um and just so everyone knows, I'm not like in the medical field or anything. I'm just a podcaster. But But the doctor did say that the lupus might have also caused some heart issues. But obviously the propofol like was the main cause. But sometimes I wonder if like all of his health issues were like on top of it, and the propofol was basically just the icing on the cake, unfortunately.
So I believe I agree with you what you said, but a lot of people wonder why wasn't his diagnosis on the autopsy? Well, on this website it says lupus has the nature of the disease, and it seems that an ANA test wasn't performed, which an ANA test is a special test that has a special marker for it, and it did not test positive in the ANA test. But sometimes people that suffer mainly from discoid lupus, they don't have positive in an ANA test. So I'm not saying that it was impositive that he had lupus. He had some type of lupus, but not to the point that it would affect his whole body. It could have been just his skin, but then eventually it could have went to systematic because he had the skin type first before it went to his body. But then
Yeah.
also said in the autopsy that he was anemic, meaning that he was probably short of, red blood cells, and also he was on a prescription for prednisone, which I don't really like prednisone because I was on prednisone briefly once before, and it makes you stay awake or fall asleep and have weight gain. But
Oh, yeah. I hate when medicines do that. Like when you see all these commercials on TV and they try to come up with these medications that can help you with certain things, like when they say that weight gain is a possible side effect, I'm like, well, nobody wants to take that.
but another medication that's better than prednisone, the one that Michael was on in the 80s after his Pepsi accident, it showed that he was on Plaquenil and Octabrine. Now, Plaquenil is the most common medication for lupus, and I take that twice a day. Of course, it's a different milligram than what Michael had because he had 200 milligram, but I'm not going to say what I do because that's personal. But
Yeah,
it did help. I guess it helped his treatment because he was taking it in the 80s, but I'm not sure if he was still on Plaquenil after the 80s, like in the later years, but I feel like Plaquenil could have helped him if he was still on the same medication, but we never know if he was still on medication for lupus or not by the time he passed away.
yeah. And sometimes I wonder, like, if his lupus did affect the joints, which I have a feeling it did, you know, um, that I wonder. I mean, obviously, Michael loved to dance and stuff, but I think there were times when he was putting so much pressure on himself that, with all the dancing and practicing he did, there is a possibility that his joints were um, very fragile because of all the practicing he was doing. I mean, I love what he did for us. Don't get me wrong, but there were a couple of times when I was thinking, it's kind of like when you were mentioning earlier about when the bridge collapsed and he was still performing. I was like, sweetie, you should have stopped the performance and went straight to the hospital.
Yeah, I agree, but it was amazing to see him pull through, but then he collapsed at the end of the performance when he went backstage. I don't know how he held
Yeah.
on because it probably would have been in the news. Like, there probably would have been a video on YouTube of him collapsing.
As much as I hate to say it though, I have like, obviously I wish Michael was still here, but can you imagine though, like, if he went to London and he was trying to do This Is It, like, I'm pretty sure he would have collapsed on stage, as much as I hate to say it.
Yeah, I hate to agree with that too. Now, another thing I just found out on this website, getting back to the prednisone, in the autopsy, it showed he was on prednisone, but he wasn't on Plaquenil. However, prednisone is one of the most common drugs that causes insomnia. So this is also the
Yeah.
same time period where Murray was giving him propofol, and insomnia is one of the side effects of prednisone. So part of his sleeping problems may have been involved with the use of prednisone. For those who are surprised by that,
Yeah, I saw that in the video of the interview with I don't remember the doctor's name, but I'm going to share it to my community tab after this. But yeah, he said that there was a medication that he was on for his lupus, and one of the side effects was insomnia. And I think another reason was it's kind of like when Michael said that when he was on tour, like he went from one continent to the other, the time zones are different and everything. Like so I completely understand why he would have trouble going to sleep at night.
yeah, and I know people wonder how come he didn't come forward and say he had lupus. Somehow, some way, he kept it to himself. But when he was talking to Oprah and he said he had vitiligo, I guess he didn't want to foreclosure the lupus part because maybe people would have been like, "What is lupus?" But I don't know.
I
I'm
mean,
not sure how you
if
could pinpoint.
I had oh sorry.
No, no, you're good. Go ahead.
I mean if I had to guess, like um obviously I can't speak for Michael, but if I had to guess, like maybe he was afraid of being judged if he opened up about his lupus because a lot of people already like didn't believe him when he opened up about his vitiligo and they accused him of bleaching his skin and all this other stuff and so he was probably afraid or most likely would be like, well, it's none of the public's business anyway.
Yeah, and there was not many much research on lupus in the 80s or 90s compared to now. And there's so
Yeah.
many more famous people that had lupus, like Selena Gomez, for example. She had lupus and she had to get a kidney transplant because one of her
Oh.
kidneys was failing. And she had a transplant a couple years ago because my mom told me this, and I was surprised to hear about that. But not many people have lupus because it affects African Americans more.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's the same thing with vitiligo from what I've heard.
Yeah, but every day the research changes and you never know what new medications are out there. And another thing with Michael, which I don't know if this was a symptom of lupus or not, but it had something to do with the lungs that in 2007 on here it says that he was coughing up blood from Dr. Murray's
Oh.
medical notes in 2007. Now that's pretty scary because we don't know if he had anything to do with like part of the lupus for the lungs, or that could have been a separate issue unless it was a side effect of the medication that he was on.
Hmm.
And if you guys want to check this website out, it's called truemichaeljackson.com. And there's so much more besides the lupus. There's vitiligo, his insomnia, everything else that occurred during his life if you want to read up about it. And before I forget, speaking of lupus, there was a new thing that came out in the news a couple days ago about a lupus uh, breakthrough. The root cause of lupus has been a complete mystery until now, which I wanted to bring this up since we're talking about it.
Hmm.
So, so recently they said that Hold on.
You're good.
So they said it's a bit premature right now of what they found, but they did say that they found that there was an imbalance when they compared blood samples from 19 lupus patients and 19 healthy ones. So
Hmm.
what they said for treatment for lupus has came a long way because the blood test to detect lupus entered circulation in 1948, and back then the life expectancy would have been a bit shortened compared to now. But now there's so many more effective treatments for people, and most of the treatments work by suppressing the immune system, so they're very effective at shutting down inflammation that's leading to disease flares. But there's so much more research that they do every day, and you never know what can happen in the next 10 years if a cure would come for lupus. But if you identify the cause for the disease, then they could find a potential cure that will not have the side effects of current therapies.
Yeah, I mean, the way that research works, like it's amazing, you know. And I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, even though I don't have lupus or vitiligo, I do have glaucoma, which is why I am blind in one eye. And I'll never forget, um, like everything that I've had to go through with it.